trying to make sure we had a dance partner because they get filled up pretty quick with teams practicing together. And so we had requested to work with Seattle, knowing that they'd be one of our likely preseason opponents. And I talked to Mike for a little bit and that Wednesday and Thursday since we play Saturday. But it's great. I'm looking forward to it. We had some conversations about some of the other teams that we play to see if we could make that work. Logistically, it gets hard, but I do 2 weeks or 3 weeks of it if we could. It really changes up training camp, and you get to evaluate your guys versus other people, other schemes. So excited about it. I love doing the joint practices, and I think our guys do too.
That was Brian Callahan. They said they are having joint practices with Seattle, which, let me just say this. When I looked at the schedule and I saw that Seattle was home in the preseason, I was like, yes! Because I'm not going to Seattle. I'm just going to tell you guys right, I am not going to Seattle for joint practices. We went to Tampa Bay 3 years ago because the Titans were going to be scrimmaging against the best team in the NFL, the defending Super Bowl champions, with the greatest quarterback who ever lived, and I felt like that was worth it. I went last year to Minnesota because, well, Minnesota had Kirk Cousins and Justin Jefferson, and I'm not sure I'd make the trip out to Seattle.
Could have been a nice break from the heat.
No, that is true.
But it's pretty far.
I'll be spending enough time in Canada during the summer, I think, that it'll be okay. But I do think joint practices are very good. I thank God they're in Nashville, but I do think they're beneficial, and I do think they're fun for everybody. I think they're fun for the players, fun for the coaches, fun for the fans, fun for the media, because when they get them, the Titans have already been scrimmaging with each other for 3 weeks. Meanwhile, in Los Angeles, the Rams are having joint practices with Dallas, 2 with the Chargers, and 1 with the Texans. So they'll get 4 days of joint practices. And Sean McVay was very excited about this, saying that none of them are back-to-back. He's like, it's great. And I understand what he means, because it's like, you want to go full energy one day, and then you come back out the second day. Well, you can't be full energy 2 days in a row. This is football. So I think it's great for the Rams that they have 4 days of joint practices. It's easy when there's another team in the city that you reside in, so they can just practice the Chargers. And Dallas's training camp is held in Oxnard, California, so they can go with them, and there's a preseason game against the Texans. So it's very, very simple. I have an idea. Brian Callahan says he wants more teams to scrimmage, says he wants more opportunities to get that extra work in and compete against somebody else and whatnot. I have an idea. Why don't you just play your players in the preseason? Right? Like Sean McVay is sitting here and he's saying, oh, this is great. We've got 4 days of practices that aren't back-to-back that we can really work out with another team and get those. Why don't you just play in the preseason? Isn't that kind of what the preseason's for? Instead, it's like, oh, great. We'll get a day where we go up against the Texans and we get to work on our scheme and we get to hit somebody else and we get to compete. Why don't you just do that in the games that are already scheduled that you're already going to have? Like, well, we don't wear the pads that much in training camp. There's 3 days where you wear the pads and 3 days where you tackle. The preseason games. And so if I was Brian Callahan and I was looking to get this extra work in against other teams, I'd play my players in the preseason. If I was Brian Callahan, I'd go to Amy and I'd say, hey, I want Will Levis to go in all 3 preseason games. And if Levis goes, so goes the rest of the offense. There's no point. You're not going to put Levis behind a backup offensive line. And there's no point in having Levis work on his timing with Jaquan Jackson. Like, Levis needs to go out there and throw the ball to DeAndre Hopkins and Tyler Boyd. So if I were to do that, if I were to actually play my players in the preseason, which I know is, I mean, you play your players in the preseason? I know it's crazy. But if I were to do that, I would get 3 days of basically joint practices where my guys get live reps with real hitting and real tackling, which is going to happen week 1 against Chicago. And I do wonder this with the trend, and I think it's hilarious that it is McVay that is scheduling 4 days of joint practices when he was the guy who was the first guy to basically be like, no starters play in the preseason. That really started this trend. I do wonder if you played your starters in the preseason, and I'm not saying play them all the game, but if you played them more than 13 snaps, 9 snaps, the 3 snaps where Tannehill came in, handed off, and then got off the field last year, which I thought was so disingenuous. But if you actually played your starters, let's say 1/2 in the first preseason game, 3/4 in the second preseason game, and then you play them a quarter in the third preseason game, wouldn't you be ahead of most teams when the season starts? Because everybody else is sitting their guys on the bench and they're not going hard and they're not, maybe they'll have a joint practice or two and that's it. But you actually get the opportunity to compete in real football. Am I crazy? Like, am I the only person that sits here and listens to these coaches talk about the benefits of joint practices and thinks to myself, when Brian Callahan is saying, well, I'm glad we can get these joint practices with the Seahawks, I really wish we could get more joint practices, and thinks, why don't you use the preseason games as practice? Is that crazy? And I understand the idea that in a practice, it's controlled, right? Like, okay, we're going to work on third down right now. So we can run 6 plays in a row on third down and practice our third down stuff. Or, we're going to work on goal line here. So everybody go down to the goal line and let's do that. And I understand you can't do that in a preseason game. But guess what? Everything else is simulated. Like a game. When Will Levis breaks the huddle in the preseason, there will be fans. And he'll have to adjust with the play clock and with the real referees and with the potential that he could get hit and all of these things. Is it crazy to play him in the preseason if you really want the joint practice work? And so now what the teams are doing is they basically want preseason games where they can control the situation and where their quarterbacks don't get hit. And I think the benefit of competing against somebody else, hitting somebody else, having your inexperienced offensive line that is going to be a work in progress go up against other teams. I think the benefit of that outweighs the risk of somebody getting hurt. So count me in for the preseason saying, hey, maybe let's play them in the preseason instead of complaining that we don't get more joint practice time. But that's just me. I know. Crazy, right? 615-737-1025. We're to your phones. We got the Jaron Christian signing with the offensive line. We got all of that. We'll get to your phones next. Stillman and Company, 1025-1063 The Game. And let me tell all the fine folks out there to tune in to Robbie and Rex Show tomorrow from 6 to 9 a.m. for your chance to win tickets to see Alanis Morissette at Bridgestone Arena on June 23rd. Contest presented by Green Trees. And tomorrow, Robbie and Rex Road will be broadcasting live from the grand opening of a new Dunkin' location in Nashville at 326 Harding Place. 1025 The Game will be on site from 6 to 9 a.m. Stop by and have your chance to win a lot of great prizes.
When it comes to Nicholas Petit for a coach, just what has he been like in the film room? We've clearly not seen him out here, but we know he's in that building.
He's been great in the film room. In the classroom, he's been outstanding. Unfortunately, he's still on the mend, so we haven't had that luxury of getting those reps from the classroom to the grass. But he's excellent. He's got really good awareness. He has really good questions. He can anticipate, adjustments when we're talking through schematics on the board or just in general off the film. So he's been a real pleasure, and I'm excited to get him in training camp when he's healthy and see what we can do.
Is he behind the gun at all when it comes to, maybe
I wouldn't say so.
Okay.
I wouldn't say so.
Okay.
No, PT's fine, says Bill Callahan. Then the Titans went out and signed Jaron Christian to play, I don't know where to play. Again, he's got 1,700 career snaps at left tackle, 9 starts last year for the Cleveland Browns, coached by Bill Callahan. He's got 125 career snaps at right tackle. But I do love this idea that it's like every missed practice for Nicholas Petit-Frere, I'm like, is this guy ever going to get out on the field? And everyone's like, oh, Jared, it doesn't matter. Bill Callahan will fix it. You don't understand. It'll be fine. And here they are the second OTAs are over. It's like, yeah, go get another tackle. I do wonder if a guy who's made 25 starts over 5 years and has only taken 125 snaps at right tackle, does that count as a starting right tackle? Like when we say they don't have a right tackle, does this count as the right tackle? I have a hard time getting there.
I don't know. I mean, he started 0-2. He started 6 of 6 games in his third year in 2020. He might have gotten hurt or something there.
Or COVID.
Oh, maybe it was, something like that. And then he started 8 games, played 14. So I don't know. He started a bunch last year, 9 games started. So that's a good sign.
And it was for Cleveland. But remember, Cleveland went through like 6 tackles last year. Because Conklin got hurt, Wills got hurt, Jones got hurt, and
desperate times call for desperate measures.
Somehow, some way, with Joe Flacco at quarterback, that team still won games. Phone lines are driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com. Michael is up next on the tackle. Thank you for calling. Go ahead, Michael.
Hey, thanks for taking my call.
Sure.
Do you think it's a possibility? I listened to the 3 possibilities that you listed out earlier for what this signing might mean. Do you think it's a possibility that they believe that the right side of the line is so much weaker than the left side of the line that they would move Latham over to right tackle because Christian has more left tackle experience? Not because Latham isn't ready to play left tackle, but they'd feel more comfortable with him over there and Christian being a plug-and-play left tackle.
Michael, hang on the line here because I'm going to ask you a question. I'm including Ian in this. We all get a vote, okay. Majority rules. What would you feel more comfortable with right now? Jaron Christian at left tackle and J.C. Latham at right tackle, or J.C. Latham at left tackle and Nicholas Petit-Frere, a.k.a. PT, at right tackle. Ian, you go first.
I'll take PT at right.
Okay. Michael, you go second.
I would take Latham over at left tackle.
Okay. So I would go the other way, actually. I would go with Christian at left tackle and Latham at right tackle. I would feel more comfortable with that. But to your point, thank you for your call, Michael. To your point, you guys have it, and you guys are probably right. Like I think J.C. Latham's going to be left tackle.
I think he's going to be a good left tackle.
I believe that the number one reason that I listed that they made the signing was that this is the backup to J.C. Latham. I think that's what this is.
Could he play swing?
125 snaps in his career at right tackle.
I mean, that's not a lot. So maybe not, but maybe in a pinch.
I mean, they won't let Dylan Radins play right tackle. Bill Callahan said yesterday that they're going to work Dylan Radins in at center. That they're going to, all those guys, Brunskill, Charles, Radins, all those guys are going to be working at the guard spots in center. And I heard that, and I was like, because he kept talking about versatility, and he kept talking about guard and center. But he never talked about versatility and like, oh, yeah, and we're going to get, I guess they call him Rad. Where he never said, oh, we're going to put Rad out there at right tackle. And I was like, really? Because, like, I think Radins right now is the best right tackle on the team. Well, other than Latham. But who knows? One texter in the text line says, I don't know what this is. One texter in the text line says, if Skoronski is the best left tackle on the team, I'm going to go crazy. Well, they'll never play him, so I don't know how to help you there. Another texter, a bunch of people have texted in about the preseason games. JC says, amen, Jared. What do they think the preseason games are for? Again, Brian Callahan talked about, I love the joint practices. Sean McVay, this is the one that gets me. Sean McVay is the guy that kind of started the trend of, I'm not playing anybody in the preseason. When I was a kid, the Titans would play the starters for about 2 or 3 series in the first preseason game. They'd play them for about a quarter in the second preseason game. They'd play them for 2 quarters in the third preseason game, and then they really wouldn't play them much in the fourth preseason game. I remember they went to Green Bay on Monday Night Football in the fourth preseason game in like 2004, and McNair got rocked, and it was like, okay, he's coming out. But they used to play, the Steve McNairs and the Eddie Georges in the preseason. Now, after McVay and company, we're not playing anybody. And so now McVay is the guy who's like, I've got 4 joint practices and none of them are back-to-back. So we can really get the good work in. We got 1 with the Cowboys, 2 with the Chargers, 1 with the Texans, so we can work on our scheme against different guys. We can practice and hit other people. We can, all these things. You can do that in the preseason. Another texter says, agreed, I went to the preseason game last year, 2 plays of Tannehill and 4 quarters of Malik running around like a squirrel. More Vrabel bullcrap. So glad that guy is gone. Another texter says, I totally agree with you. Wasn't it Corey that said on our show that day, he was like, I don't know how much Tannehill's going to play, but Tannehill's going to play. And Jim Wyatt wrote at the Titans website that he expected Tannehill to play. So everybody ran with that. It was like, oh, Tannehill's going to play. And then as soon as the TV broadcast came on, the guys were like, and don't really expect to see Tannehill to play much here. Ha, ha, ha. And then he handed the ball off 3 times and went to the sidelines. I'm like, that is so disingenuous. So disingenuous. One texter says, this is why they're pushing an 18-game season, because there's no action in the preseason. Well, the reason they're pushing 18 games is because when they go to the networks and they're negotiating these multi-billion dollar TV contracts, they say, well, instead of 17 games or 17 weeks of games, you get 18 weeks of games. It has nothing to do with the preseason. And I think the NFL is kind of taking the coaches. See, when the practice time really started to decrease, the off-season practice time, the padded practices, the two-a-days, it was the 2011 CBA. That was when a lot of this changed. The owners wanted their money, the players wanted their money, and they wanted something. And so for the owners to get their money, they had to cut the revenue a little bit, i.e. pay the players less, but also say, like, we're going to have Thursday night football, and we're going to have this, and we're going to have that. And so they gave up the off-season practice time and the two-a-days and the pads and all of that. And after that CBA was ratified, coaches in the league went ballistic, saying, like, how are we supposed to be good if we can't practice? If we could only wear pads, I think it's something like 10 times or something like that during the preseason in training camp. We can only wear pads 10 days out of a month and a half. I mean, how are we supposed to actually teach offensive line technique? And the owners looked at the coaches and said, yeah, we don't care. Like, I'm sorry. Figure it out. We don't care. And I believe that that's why the offensive line play across the league is so bad, which is leading to all of these quarterback injuries. But because the coaches have decided we don't need the preseason, Roger Goodell is saying, well, let's just take that and make it a real game and make $1 gazillion more off of it. Dylan says, what in the hell is PT's injury anyways? How can you be injured for the entire offseason? I do wonder that, because on one hand, we heard that it was something like that shoulder injury that he had last year, where basically TJ Watt came off the edge and PT was trying to block him, and because TJ Watt's so fast and PT's not, TJ Watt basically tore his arm out of the socket and he had to have surgery, and that was the end of the season for PT. But then I heard Jim Wyatt say, and Jim can go to the practices that aren't open to everybody, and Jim says that he's seen PT out there on the field. So I don't know if it's a new injury for PT or not. The difference between me and everybody else is that I'm not counting on Petit Frere. They might be. But when they signed Jaron Christian today, it kind of feels like there's a sentiment that maybe they're not. James says, Radens being the best anything on this team is bad news. Well, you can deny it or you can accept it. That's just how it works.
Looks like 16 padded practices.
16 padded practices.
And not 3 days in a row or something like that.
I wonder what the old days were. I wonder if the old days were like padded practices every day. Floyd told me like back in the day, like in the olden days.
The 2 days.
Well, not only did they have 2 days, he told me like back in the olden days that they would take like a week off or like 2 weeks off after the season, and then they just, all right, everybody, we'll see you for practice. And they just practice all winter long. And now it's like the guys don't even show up until April. They have a 10-week program that's all voluntary, and now the Players Association is trying to get rid of that, which is crazy to me. But hey, again, I'm the crazy one because I'm the one that thinks, hey, if you really want all this extra joint practice work, why don't you play them in the preseason games? I don't. One texter says, I just can't see the starters not playing in the preseason. With a new coach, system, and new roster, they would go into the season more behind than ever before. We have to remember, though, Brian Callahan is a guru, and the gurus do not play in the preseason. McVay does not play these guys in the preseason. He's a guru. Shanahan, I don't think Shanahan plays these guys in the preseason, though I do think he played Purdy last year, but I think that was because Purdy was coming off of the elbow. But for the most part, they do not play these guys. So, I hear you. 615-737-1025 is our phone number. Couple of NFL stories I want to get into that, I feel bad for two fan bases that are not the Titans fan base. We'll get to that coming up next. Let's talk Window Nation. I have told you that Window Nation is a company you can trust, and you know I believe that. Here's how much I trust Window Nation. Trevor texted me, and he said, hey, I'm thinking about getting some windows done. What's the window company? And I sent him the info. I say, you've got to call my friends at Window Nation, and they'll take great care of you. And you guys know how much I love Trevor. So if I'm going to tell Trevor that he can trust Window Nation, that means that you guys know that I trust Window Nation. I told you, I had them out to my home, and I sat down through the entire process of them showing me all their great windows, the good, better, best models, everything else. And I said, okay, what windows do I need to replace? They went and looked at my windows, and they said, Jared, your windows are good. You don't need to replace them. I said, seriously? You guys came all the way out here, and you're telling me that you don't want to make a sale? Yep. I said, okay, that right there is an honest company. And so I don't know about the other window companies, but I know about Window Nation. And I know that they will take great care of you. And they've got a great deal, the semi-annual sale through June 30th. Get 50% off all windows, along with no interest for 5 years, plus a bonus 10% savings when you schedule an estimate today. That's right. 50% off all windows, no interest for 5 years, a bonus 10% savings when you schedule that in-home estimate today. Call 866-90NATION or visit windownation.com. Again, that's 866-90NATION, windownation.com.
Why BS? An event? I was told last night from a source I trust, Aaron's on vacation and it's overseas. I'm also told you'll learn about where he's at tomorrow. Don't want to burn my source. I'm told you'll learn about it tomorrow. Maybe he is at an event. Can't believe there's something overseas that would take 7, 8, 9 days. Again, maybe they have a music festival. But the point is, don't be surprised by this. This is sort of what you would expect. Impulsive owner, new GM, coach with a losing record, prickly, older at times, arrogant, disconnected quarterback in New York City with a pretty relentless and inarguably massive press corps. This is what you get.
Colin, the news of the day, really yesterday, Aaron Rodgers missing mandatory minicamp for the Jets. And you heard what Colin said. I was told by a source he's out of the country. We'll know about it tomorrow, which means he'll probably go on the Pat McAfee show tomorrow and have a conspiracy theory as to why it's okay for him to miss mandatory minicamp. But I got to tell you, to me, we believe in the duck theory on this show. If it looks like a duck and it quacks like a duck, chances are it's probably a duck. Aaron Rodgers doesn't care about football anymore. Aaron Rodgers stopped caring about football a long time ago. All Aaron Rodgers cares about is Aaron Rodgers. That's it. And so when Aaron Rodgers was threatened by the Green Bay Packers drafting Jordan Love, he just decided right then and there that he was going to make Green Bay pay for it. That's narcissism. So that right there is what led to the great 2 years that Aaron Rodgers had. Then there was the winter of Aaron with the cryptic Instagram posts and the random Pat McAfee appearances and all these words that didn't totally add up for us to know what they meant or what they didn't mean. By the way, Aaron was telling people that he was open to joining the Titans. And then Aaron finally, after the Packers acquiesce, Aaron goes back to Green Bay and has a subpar season. The Packers move on. Then he goes to the Jets. He runs the team. The owner flies out there. The coach flies out there. The GM. He gets his offensive coordinator, who by all accounts is a total doofus. Aaron gets what he wants. Then he gets hurt. Then the building becomes a complete and total train wreck. The reality is, Aaron Rodgers is always about Aaron. And this mini camp, I believe, is an opportunity for Aaron to flex the muscle of, I don't want to be there, so I'm not going to. You're not the boss of me, coach. I'm the boss. Diana Rossini was talking today about how, Aaron just chose not to go. Now, McAfee, who carries water for Aaron Rodgers, we know, McAfee was saying the Jets knew about this, the Jets were okay with it, and that Robert Saleh made a story out of nothing when he got up there and said Aaron Rodgers had an unexcused absence. Again, I can't tell you. Maybe Aaron is off somewhere saving the lives of innocent children, and I'll come on the air tomorrow and I'll apologize if that's the case. I will. But right now, it looks like Aaron Rodgers doesn't care about football anymore. It looks like Aaron Rodgers is all about showing the Jets, hey, I'm still the boss around here. Because remember, this offseason, they didn't go sign all those Aaron players like they did last year. Alan Lazard and Billy Patrick or whatever, the guard they had or whatever, Billy Turner, that's it. Billy Turner and Randall Cobb and the Aaron crew. This year, they're like, no, we're not going to go sign these guys that stink just because Aaron wants us to. Well, now Aaron's missing mandatory minicamp. The other fan base I feel bad for, and by the way, it's good news for the Titans, because you play the Jets in week 2, and you need to beat the Jets this year, because there are going to be a lot of hard games on the schedule, and I think the Jets at home week 2, I think that's kind of a 50-50 game. Most people will look at that and say the Jets will win because they think the Jets are good. But the reality is the Jets never have been good, at least anytime recently, so it's hard for me to believe that they can be good. The second fan base I feel bad for are the Pittsburgh Steelers fans. Because it came out yesterday that Mike Tomlin has signed a contract extension in Pittsburgh. I'm sorry, wasn't Mike Tomlin on the hot seat at the end of the year?
Some said.
So why is he getting a contract extension? I mean, I'm sorry. The Pittsburgh Steelers are average. Last year they made the playoffs as the 7 seed. 3 years ago they made the playoffs as the 7 seed. They lost to Kansas City and Buffalo. In neither game did they actually have a legitimate chance to win. Neither game. If, again, the NFL doesn't expand the playoff seeding, I can't even tell you when the last time the Steelers would have made the playoffs was. 2017, when they had Brown and Bell and AB, because they missed it in 2018 when AB went off the reservation. They missed it in 2019 when Ben got hurt and the Jets beat them so the Titans could get into the playoffs. I think they missed it in 2020. They absolutely missed it in 2021, or they made it in 2021 with the 7 seed. They missed it in 22. They made it in 23 with the 7 seed. I'm sorry. Why is Mike Tomlin getting an extension? It would be one thing if Mike Tomlin was getting an extension because you were entering the offseason and assistant coaches were saying, like, look, I'm not going to stay with the Steelers. I'm going to go get another job because Mike Tomlin doesn't have a contract extension and I don't want to uproot my family. And so we're just going to move now and pick our spots before we get fired. But that's not the case.
They won the North in 2017.
Okay. That's not the case. People are not getting hired. Assistant coaches are not getting hired right now. And what I think this really is I think this is the Rooney family, and they're hell-bent on protecting their identity, which is we do not fire coaches.
And they
That's
won in
their identity.
And they won in 2022.
They did go in 2022?
In 2020 also. Sorry, not 2022. They won the division in 2020.
Really?
Yeah, they were...
Oh, that's right. Cleveland went in there and beat the crap out of them in
they
the
were
playoffs.
12-4, yeah.
I forgot about that. Okay. But again, why is Tomlin getting an extension? You know, I've always talked about this. When it's like these colleges sometimes just feel the need to extend coaches for no reason. And it's like, oh, well, you know, we got to recruiting. If we don't, then who knows? And so then you start giving Jerry Stackhouse a contract extension for no reason. It's like when Jeremy Pruitt got his ill-fated extension. Tennessee fans got mad at me. Jared, you don't understand. But I was like, why is he getting an extension? He's doing an okay job. When you do an okay job, you don't get fired, but you shouldn't get rewarded. Tomlin's doing an okay job. Let's see if Tomlin can figure out the quarterback position before we go all in on him. But I'm going to tell you right now, I think this is the Steelers. I think this is their identity. We do not fire coaches. That's our identity. Just kind of how like the Titans' identity is that they do fire coaches. The Steelers are all in on their identity that they don't fire coaches. 615-737-1025 is our phone number, 615-737-1025. I was shocked today, Ian, when Chris Sanders came on the show and said he was worried about T'Vondre Sweat.
He's not much of a warrior, usually.
No, he is not. And so that should tell you something. So now, I have to ask Titan fans, are you really going to defend this start? We'll get to that next. Stillman and Company, 102.5, 106.3 The Game. Stillman and Company, 102.5, 106.3 The Game, streaming live on Twitter, Twitch, YouTube, and Facebook live from the Busy Bee Plumbing, Heating, and Air Conditioning Game Nashville studios. So I was shocked when we had Chris Sanders on earlier today, and I asked him if he was worried about T'Vondre Sweat, because, Chris is always positive. And Chris was like, I'm worried. And yesterday, Trevor, who was very complimentary of the T'Vondre Sweat pick when they made it, Trevor was like, I am getting worried about all these absences. So just to recap T'Vondre Sweat. T'Vondre Sweat was drafted 38th. Well, let's even go further back. T'Vondre Sweat was a bad boy at Texas. Let's not sugarcoat it. He was a great player on a very good defense on the first really good Texas team since Vince Young was the quarterback. Or I should say, 2009, Colt McCoy, they got to the title game. So that is worth something. Won the Outland Trophy. Very, very good. Gets a DWI. Reportedly played at 380 pounds last year. Got down to 366 at the combine. Still too big. There are concerns about maturity, partying, weight. And again, the DWI did happen. I did laugh out loud, though. I forget what interview Rand did. Rand did an interview talking about T'Vondre Sweat where he was like, well, he could have used the excuse that somebody hit him and that's how he got the DWI. And I'm like, that is not an excuse. If you're in the mafia and you've got a dead body in the trunk and somebody rear ends you and it pops open the trunk and they see the dead body in there, is it like, well, we really can't be upset at Tony for whacking the guy because he got hit, so it's not, you see what I'm saying? So I thought that was disingenuous, but that wouldn't be the first time that I think the Titans said something that's disingenuous. But ever since they drafted him, all these draft gurus and insiders and everybody were like, ooh, I don't know about 38. And the Titans are like, no, you don't understand. We know. We did our homework. The Rams made that just redonkulous trade to move up to 39. It sounded like in the Rams video they put out, when you compare it to what Brian Callahan said at the podium afterwards, it sounds like the Rams made the offer to the Titans and the Titans said no. Just so they could get T'Vondre Sweat. So they get T'Vondre Sweat. T'Vondre Sweat comes in, does a press conference. He's there for rookie minicamp. He runs around the bags a couple of times. Okay. Then they start OTAs where the rookies are mixing in with the veterans, and he gets out there, and there's a video of him catching a football. I don't know why, because he doesn't play receiver, but again, who knows? Then he didn't practice for the first open OTA. Then he didn't practice for the second open OTA. Then he didn't practice the 3 days of minicamp. Brian Callahan said at minicamp that he thought there was a chance T'Vondre Sweat would be back this week. Then he did not practice. Brian Callahan said he was not worried about T'Vondre Sweat. And yet all I can think about is, boy, this isn't a good start. That's all I can get back to. And yet I still think there are a bunch of Titan fans out there that are going to hear this and hear me bring up this fact that, he has missed every single open practice. He, I believe, has missed every single practice except for one, the first one. And then he got hurt. And they're going to say, Jared's a hater. Jared's going after Rand. Jared, even though I blame Brian Callahan and Chad Brinker too. Jared says this, Jared. And they're not actually going to sit there and say, man, did my team really make a mistake here? I think there's a lot of Titan fans that haven't looked at this and said, oh boy, this could be bad. And yet, at the same time, literally everybody was telling you when they drafted him, I don't know about that, man. I'll tell you. You said, no, we know, and the guy hasn't practiced yet. This is literally everybody telling you, I don't know about T'Vondre Sweat.
But Sweat is just a massive human being who can push the pocket with that power, put that weight and that size to work and just walk centers and guards back. I don't believe he's a big-time pass rusher. You see flashes of it, like this one against TCU. This was a very polarizing player.
So when you look at it and you size it all up, I thought at the end of the day he'd be a third-round pick like Gilbert Brown, who was my comp to him when he came out of Kansas a while ago, right? Had a good career. T'Vondre Sweat was a little early for everybody, I think.
I think the question was like, is he going to weigh 400 pounds by his, third year in the league? Like, is it always going to be like a weight and conditioning management issue with him? Is he going to be able to pass the fitness test at the beginning of camp? That kind of a thing.
T'Vondre Sweat, I think, surprised people in the second round. I really do. I think it surprised a lot of people because a lot of people thought he was ticketed more towards the third round.
Yeah, when you're picking in the second round at 38, which is at the top of the second round, usually, the question is, can this guy be a 3-down player or not? And if he's a 2-down player, then more likely you may get an opportunity to take a swing at him later, or maybe consider trading back and still getting him to get just some more draft capital.
Would you have taken him this high?
No.
Just on-field productivity only, would you have taken him this high?
No.
For some teams, I don't want to say he came off the board, but I think the teams that were looking at him saying he's either a sub-board player for us, which means we set him to the side and we are not going to draft this guy until we think the risk and the reward intersect, and that's probably in like the 4th round.
I mean, that's a lot of commentary that's like, T'Vondre Sweat's got talent. T'Vondre Sweat's good, but I don't know about 38. And again, the Titans were telling everybody, no, we know. Remember, Rand had his mystery GM text him and say, I would have picked him. Maybe it was the same mystery GM that texted him about Colton Dowell and Peter Skoronski too. We'll never know. But the point I'm trying to make here is, I think the majority of this fan base, when they were posed with the opinions of everybody else, including the executive that was quoted in the Mike Sando article of saying, this is a guy who's going to break your heart. And the Titans, who said, we know better than everybody else, this is a fan base that really, 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 really wanted to believe that the Titans knew better than everybody else, and everybody else was wrong. Rick Spielman's wrong, Mel Kiper's wrong, Daniel Jeremiah's wrong, everybody's wrong. That's what they wanted to believe. But now that 6 weeks after the draft? 7 weeks after the draft? Now that we're sitting here, can you really say to yourself, yeah, everybody was wrong when this guy has not even gotten on the field for practice? Can you really say that? And my gut tells me that there are a lot of people out there that are like, yeah, I can't say that anymore. I can't say it. I cannot say, okay, the Titans know what they're doing here. The Titans have this plan. The Titans, they've got it figured out. They know they'll get. Not when the guy never practices. And we all went through Traylon Burks 2 years ago with the asthma and the excuse making. And I forget who it was that said today, like, they were like, did Traylon Burks' allergies go away? All the excuse making, that it was hot. Like, did all that go away? Or, I mean, what did happen to his asthma? Does he still have the asthma? I don't even know. But all the excuses were made, and then we kind of seen what's happened with Traylon Burks. I'm not saying, are you out on T'Vondre Sweat? I'm not saying that. I am saying, are you open to the possibility that everybody else is right and the Titans are wrong? Because when they made this pick, and it was a very controversial pick when it was made, a lot of people said you were wrong, and you guys said, no, the Titans say they're right. Rand's mystery GM texted him and told him that. And now I wonder, 5 weeks, just a little bit. 615-737-1025. We'll get to more of your phones, Fitz, later this hour. Plus, I do have a question. This is a show that I enjoy the honesty on. And I have a question, a T'Vondre Sweat question, that I am going to pose to Ian and to you guys. And I need you to be honest with me. And we'll do that next. 615-737-1025. Get your team signed up now to play in the 615 Open, presented by Gary Force Acura at Hermitage Golf Course on Thursday, June 20th. There will be delicious sampling offerings from Prince's Hot Chicken, Bavarian Beer House, and more. Enjoy Michelob Ultra and other adult beverages at our sampling stations. And afterwards, dinner is provided by Burger Republic. Sign up to play today at 615open.com. if a genie was sitting with them and saying, just so you know, he's not going to be able to practice at all during OTAs and minicamp, do you think that the Titans would have still taken him 38th, or do you think they would have said that and said, no, that's too big of a risk. We can't do it?
Yeah, see, under those circumstances, I bet it would have given them pause. See, I'm sort of in the minority, Jared, in that I don't think taking him when they did high in the second round was bad, based on what we knew at the time, certainly. Because he wasn't at Texas, he played a lot of snaps. He was a 3-down defensive lineman. But this is a real problem because in order to take him and then say, okay, he's overweight, we do want him to get down. This is not a 13, 14 game season, even a 15 game season in college. If you go on to the national championship game, you're talking about 17 regular season games and then playoffs, and it exacerbates problems towards the end of the season. And I think that the Titans may have thought, we're going to hold off on drafting this guy because right now the choice is sort of contingent on him being able to step into our facility with our strength staff and get into the football shape we want him to be in. And right now they can't do that with him.
That was Trevor yesterday on the program saying, I think if they knew ahead of time that T'Vondre Sweat was not going to practice or be available to practice, I think they would have maybe held off a little bit. Even though they drafted him, everybody in the country was like, and after they did that, they were like, no, we know, not everybody else. So, Ian, I'm putting you on the spot.
Okay.
It's a binary choice. You're betting for or against T'Vondre Sweat here?
For as in being able to produce this season?
Yeah, to make it, to be worth the 38th pick, again, I
just a career thing or just this year?
Career.
Okay.
I like the player. I get it. I get the fit, and I think he's got game, but I'm worried about all the other stuff, and so I would have taken the Rams trade and hoped that I could have gotten him at 52. Mm-hmm. That's what I would have done. But if you had to bet your house, and this is binary, this is roulette, red or black, forget about the 00 green. Would you bet your house that T'Vondre Sweat will make it, or would you bet your house that T'Vondre Sweat will fail?
I mean, I can't bet my house that he's going to make it, so I have to go fail.
Isn't that bad a month after the draft? And I think that every Titan fan probably is looking at themselves feeling the same way too.
But I might say that about almost any draft pick, not in the first round or the top 15. I might bet against any of them.
Would you feel confident in betting against Levis right now?
I would probably bet against Levis in this situation as well, yeah.
I think I probably would bet against Levis too, just from the standpoint that how many quarterbacks don't make it.
The risk is not worth the reward there, yeah.
But at the same time, it's for different reasons, right? I know Levis is going to do everything in his power to make it. I just don't know if Levis is going to make it or not.
Yeah.
With Sweat, he can't even get on the field. Phone lines are driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com, 615-737-1025. Josh says, I haven't been a fan of the picks since they made it. I felt like Rand was reaching all along. I'd feel better if Sweat was drafted in the third round or later. Sadly, the Sweat pick says more about Rand and company than Sweat. So, again, we got to stop saying that this is all Rand because this is a collaboration. It's not just Rand. Chad Brinker and Brian Callahan are equally as guilty or equally as right if Sweat ends up working. It's not just Rand. Even though Rand might be the one guy that the mystery GM texted and said that was a great pick. Or, no. Skoronski that was a great pick. Colton Dowell was, we would have picked him. And Sweat was a GM that had a pick that was before where Rand had earmarked he could move down to take Sweat, texted him and said he was going to take Sweat. That was the three mysterious text messages. Chip from Mount Juliet says, I hope we won't start to see cast-offs of Browns and Bengals players like Vrabel did with Texans rejects. Well, Chidobe Awuzie, Tyler Boyd, Leroy Watson, Jaron Christian. I mean, I think this just happens everywhere. Like if Howard Stern were to announce his retirement today, and they were to come to me and say, Jared, you say a lot of crazy things on the radio. You seem to not give a rat's ass what other people think. We want you to replace Howard Stern. And I went about building a radio show, a la the Howard Stern show. Who do you think the first person I would think of to fill the role of Robin Quivers would be? You want to take a guess?
Caroline?
Yes. That would be the first person. Why? Because I've worked with her before. That's why. So that's natural. In fact, I think the coaching staff, especially on the defensive side of the ball, which is not a lot of guys that Brian Callahan knew coming in, I think that shows you that Callahan is willing to do things that Vrabel was not willing to do. One person sent in a text and said, everybody is all concerned. The next person said, nobody's concerned. We haven't even played a game yet. One texter says, Stillman, let's make a pie-to-the-face bet. I'll take a pie to the face if Latham or Sweat ever make a Pro Bowl. Texter says, I think Latham is poised to let us down. We have strayed away from Latham only because he's been on the field, but let's be honest, at 7, that was a reach. How are we supposed to let Rand cook when the best dish he serves is meatloaf? So the Latham thing is a we'll see. I mean, and again, I think that like we talked about with Levis, I think that J.C. Latham is going to give the Titans the best. He's going to give it everything he has in order to make it. And if he doesn't make it, it's because he doesn't make it. Sweat, I can't say that about. Levis and Latham, I can say that about. Indy Ben chimes in. And I actually thought, Indy Ben might have something productive to say to this.
No.
Indy Ben said, could the Titans also be wrong about Levis considering everybody passed on him in round 1? Well, to me, the Titans would be wrong about Levis if Levis ends up becoming Dan Marino. Like the New England Patriots weren't right about Tom Brady and everybody else was wrong because they passed on him 5 times. So if Will Levis ends up becoming a superstar, then the Titans were wrong about that because they drafted a freaking guard with the 11th overall pick before taking a guy that they thought was going to be their franchise quarterback. And the only thing that I think could be real is Charles Robinson said that the coaching staff was totally against the Levis pick and that it was an ownership-driven pick. And so I could see the Titans taking Skoronski because, roll the dice, play the board. And they have Skoronski ranked as the 9th best player, and they're picking at 11, so they take Skoronski. And then they've got Levis ranked 13th, 17th, 18th, something like that, and they get to round 2, and he's sitting there, and the owners are looking at the board, and they're saying, well, wait a minute. We considered this guy. We had the 17th, we had him ranked 17th. He's sitting there at 33. Let's go get our quarterback of the future. And Vrabel being like, do we have to? And Randall, whatever the owner says, Randall go with. So I could see that being why they passed on their franchise quarterback only to take him in the 2nd round so they could take a guard. And even that reeks of I don't know. Texture in the text line says, hypothetical situation. The Titans saw the red flags and decided not to draft Sweat. Knowing what you know now about the roster, who would you have drafted in that slot? I would have taken the Rams trade. Is that a cop-out?
Well, we don't for sure know the Rams trade was.
Oh, we know.
There.
You weren't here on Friday, but on Friday, on Thursday of last week, the Rams released
I heard you guys play the clips.
Where McVay's on the phone or Snead's on the phone.
They don't want to move back that far. And then when you guys played the Callahan, or was it Callahan or Carthon?
Callahan, who was like, we didn't want to move back that far. They turned down the Rams trade.
Maybe, but we don't know that.
Duck theory. Does it look like a duck?
I guess. I mean, I don't know. I'm not willing to go that far.
Oh, I'm willing to go that far. I think you're crazy if you don't think that was exactly. Get those 2 clips up right now. I mean, I think you are crazy. Les Snead is on the phone. He says, would you take next year's second to move up? And then he turns around and tells Sean McVay they don't want to go back that far. And then right after the Titans picked Sweat, Paul Kaharski asked why they didn't trade back, and Brian Callahan said there was a certain level of player we just were not willing to move out for.
Hey, we're at 52. Would you do a future 2 to come back to 52? He'll call you back? Yeah, that's too far. They don't want to come that far.
Now, Callahan.
Some of these calls and some of these trades, you're dropping down a significant level of player when you start dropping deep into the second, and sometimes the reciprocal value isn't there because everyone thinks that they can try to pull one over and get a deal, and that's not how it works. So there's a cost of doing business, and when you want to come up that high, there's things that are required, and some teams meet it, some teams don't. But I think there was just a world of player that we weren't quite ready to dip out of.
I mean, they turned the trade down. How can you think that wasn't them?
It could have been, for sure. But do I know for sure? No. But could it have been? Yes.
If you were on the jury, would you convict? Because, again, the standard...
I would need more evidence.
So the standard is beyond a reasonable doubt.
I need more evidence.
You think there's reasonable doubt there that wasn't the Titans?
Sure.
Oh, my God. Oh, my God. I would take the Rams trade. That's what I would have done. 615-737-1025. Come on, Ian. Jason Fitz joins us next. Stillman and Company, 102.5, 106.3 The Game. And let me tell the fine folks out there, while I have your wonderful attention, that the Savannah Bananas are coming to Nashville, and you can meet the team's players and coaches, plus win tickets to their sold-out games this weekend. Join Chase and Big Joe this Friday from 9 to 11 at the Duncan in Cool Springs at 500 Cool Springs Boulevard for more details. Stillman and Company, one of my favorite segments, maybe hours that we've had over the last couple of months. was yesterday, the 3 o'clock hour. We played a cut from Kirk Morrison on SiriusXM NFL Radio saying that he thought Mike Vrabel overachieved. And, I mean, the phone lines just lit up with people wanting to talk Vrabel. And I was talking to my dad about it yesterday, and I said, I have never seen anything like this. Peter Laviolette gets fired, the fan base moves on. John Hines gets fired, fan base moves on. Maybe you talk about it that day, but even then it's like let's turn our attention to the next guy. They move on from Tannehill, everybody moves on. They move on from Mariota, everybody moved on. They moved on from Malarkey, everybody moved on. There's something about Vrabel. And somebody texted in and they said, oh, who cares about Mike Vrabel? And I'm like, this is the most reaction that we've gotten probably all week is I can't keep up with the amount of text messages and things we got about Mike Vrabel. And the one thing that I think is true are the fans out there that said it was the media that lectured us about firing Vrabel that drove everybody crazy. So with that, Vrabel doesn't have a team, but the Titan fans are excited about this season under Brian Callahan. Jason Fitz joins us now on the program, Yahoo Sports, Fox Sports Radio. So Fitz, let's start there. Titan fans are mad at the national media because they're mad about the sentiment that apparently will not go away. That is, how could they have fired Mike Vrabel? Do you think this is something that will continue on through the season, especially if Brian Callahan doesn't necessarily get off to a good start?
Yeah, I think if Callahan doesn't get off to a good start, then yeah, there'll be a lot of question marks about the Titans nationally. Part of that comes to, like, the fact is, as much as I love the opportunity that Callahan has right now, listening to you talk about, moving on. Well, moving on usually takes somebody you're moving on to that everybody's super excited about, right? Like, I think we could make the argument that usually when a team changes coaches, part of the move on process is that you fall in love with the new guy. Most people don't know enough about Brian Callahan now to fall in love with him or not fall in love with him. There's just sort of indifference. So, like, Vrabel, like it or not, was sort of represented a whole era of Titans football to a lot of people nationally. So now, when you are sitting here, people don't really know what to make of Will Levis. There's no Derrick Henry. There's no Mike Vrabel. I find overall that when I talk to people nationally about the Titans, there's this level of I'm not sure mixed with disinterest, like lack of interest. It's just one of those things. Is like, yeah, we'll see. We'll see if they're any good. I don't know how you get everybody to move forward without having somebody that you can have as the landmark. We are moving forward behind this guy. This is our new captain that everybody's in love with. And nobody knows Callahan nationally enough yet to be at that spot with him.
Why does Brian Callahan, Fitz, in your opinion, not get the benefit of the doubt given the fact that the offensive guru coach, the coordinator that comes from the Shanahan-McVay tree, has succeeded everywhere they've been?
Yeah, I think a lot of that just comes from the fact that, you got to figure out who you're going to give credit to, right? And love it or hate it, credit for the Cincinnati Bengals just all seems to go to Joe Burrow. No matter what happens, feels like everybody's in love with Joe Burrow. So there is this moment here where it's like, well, is that Callahan or is that, of course you got Joe Burrow. He's not going to have Joe Burrow. Tell me how many times, if you make it a drinking game this year when people are previewing the Titans and they say, well, Callahan doesn't have Joe Burrow there, that's just the way they've decided that credit goes. And I think it's a little bit twisted here. This is part of why, if you talk about different offensive coordinators getting different credit, part of the reason people are in love right now with Stefanski, the head coach, is because he's been able to make so much out of a rotating door at the quarterback position. That's just the way everybody analyzes things. So how do you know where the credit goes? Does it go to Burrow? Does it go to Callahan? At this point, Callahan's dad is a bigger known entity than Callahan is. So yeah, it's hard at this point to know where the credit gets assigned.
Okay, so to that point, your team has Antonio Pierce as its head coach. And I don't know how you do you love Pierce, hate Pierce? I'm guessing you like him fine?
He's fine, yeah. Fine.
Okay. Would you rather have Matt LaFleur or Antonio Pierce?
I'd probably rather have Matt LaFleur. I think there's a little bit more proof of concept. But
McDaniel?
Definitely more. I'd rather have Mike McDaniel than Antonio Pierce.
Kevin O'Connell?
Yeah, probably O'Connell.
Zach Taylor?
Yeah, Zach Taylor's fine. Yeah, it's fine. I wouldn't.
You see what? But you see what I'm getting
Taylor,
at?
Yeah, 100%.
I mean, Callahan's the next guy.
So you're right. look at the coaches that have become sort of a phenomenon. The coaches that everybody did fall in love with represent some sort of a caricature. And you've heard me talk about this in country music before. Like you can summarize so many country artists when I was in that business in one sentence. When you're like, oh, he's the Australian rock guy. Oh, that's Keith Urban. He's the 80s rock guy. That's Jason Aldean. Like you could go through, and he's the beats guy. It's Kenny Chesney. You got one sentence, you figure him out. You can sort of quickly figure out who Mike McDaniel is as a personality. Like his nerdiness became something people fell in love with right away. You can Dan Campbell, like the whole, as much as people mocked him, it seemed to be this connection between Dan Campbell and the city of Detroit that people have fallen in love with because they understood the caricature so far. I just don't think people even like the Q rating, as they say in TV. Like if Brian Callahan today walks into a Starbucks, there are people like, oh my God, that's Brian Callahan. Like nobody's fallen in love with that. To your point, I understand that where he comes from should get him some credit, but I just don't know that he's even had a sound quote yet a sound bite yet that people are sitting there saying, oh, I got to pay attention to that. And that's the way the world works. Stephen A's kind of right about that. Like you can be really smart about basketball or you can be really bad at it and just say things that people react to. And that makes you $15-16 million a year.
I just think that, again, all those guys have coached a little bit, and that's the difference. But there has not been I don't think there's been one guy that has left the womb of the McVay, the tight khaki pants and the giant play sheet and I don't think there's been one of these guys that has left that womb and has not succeeded in the last 10 years.
And when you talk about coaching trees, I think that's a huge part of it. It speaks to the fact that guys walk out of their gigs understanding what it takes to go to the next level. I think it's important to remind everybody that a great coordinator doesn't make a great coach so often because they're very different skill sets, being a coach versus being a head coach versus being a coordinator. What that tells you, the success that has come out of that tree, is that guys figure out just being around the building how to best run a locker room, which I think is a huge part of it. This all rights itself, though, quickly. If the Titans, in midpoint of the season, if the Titans are sitting there at 6-2, everybody's going to be in love with Brian Callahan. Like that's the interesting one. It's got to happen, and unfortunately, everybody wants people to just flock to their favorite team. And the more I just consistently watch what we all do for a living, the more I just sit there and say, all right, you know what? If your team is good, you will eventually get the cred you deserve. It's just going to take a second. So like that part of it will work itself out. Right now, the hard part, and I've said this to you before, is because we're so obsessed with coaches and quarterbacks in today's society, because nobody really knows about Will Levis, nobody really knows about Brian Callahan, the Titans are going to enter this season nationally irrelevant. Nobody is going to care about the Titans on NFL Live every single day unless they come out of the gates 4-0 or 5-0. And even then, people are going to say, well, is this sustainable? Is this really Will Levis? Like, it's going to take a minute to get people to care.
Fitz, do you think that Mike Vrabel will get a head coaching job next season? And do you think it will be a good coaching job, i.e. Dallas, Buffalo, Philly, that kind of job, or it'll be a bad job like Carolina?
He'll get a good job, I think, somewhere because owners love him for whatever reason. The industry behind the scenes loves Mike Vrabel. I can't tell you why. I've asked a million people why. I can't get to the straight answer on why. I think in general, he's one of those guys that knows how to build relationships, and he's got relationships. It's a relationship business. The biggest thing to me is, frankly, I still think that Vrabel's just going to be sitting as a cast a shadow over Ohio State that spent a ton of money this year. He's made it clear that's a job he would covet. He would go back into, like, as much as college is different than the NFL. If I had to right now just make an arbitrary pizza bet on where Mike Vrabel ends up next, if Ohio State doesn't have a substantial year where they end up, in a deep playoff run, then I could see them blowing that whole thing up, and Vrabel comes as the savior for Ohio State moving next year. That's where I think his most likely destination is.
Jason Fitz is our guest on the program. I have a conspiracy theory. I want you to follow this conspiracy theory for me. I believe Caitlin Clark will be on the U.S. Olympic team. I believe that the entire time, the women's basketball organizers at Team USA, I don't know exactly what it's called, the USOC for women's hoops. I don't know if Carol Callan still runs it or not. When I was in women's hoops, she did, and I thought she was pretty bright. But whomever is running it, I believe Caitlin Clark will be in Paris. I believe that they knew that Caitlin Clark was going to be in Paris, and I believe they purposely left Caitlin Clark off of Team USA because they knew that if they did that, that they would get nonstop coverage of people that are outraged at the idea that Caitlin Clark is not on this team. So much so that I don't know about you, but I think more people care about Caitlin Clark than care about the NBA Finals. So I believe my conspiracy theory is somebody is going to get hurt. Somebody's going to take a rest. Somebody's going to be pregnant. Somebody's going to something. And Caitlin Clark will be in Paris, and the women's basketball Olympic ratings will be through the roof. That's my conspiracy theory.
I love your theory. I can't find anybody that covers the sport at a high level that has given me any indication that that is the theory. You are right about parts of this. Look, I'll say this loudly. We study the numbers every day at Yahoo. Caitlin Clark does matter right now in the national conscious more than the NBA Finals. The numbers bear that out. Like anything we put up on Caitlin Clark, and we're just Yahoo, anything we put up on Caitlin Clark will outperform anything we put up on the Celtics and Mavs. We know that. We see that. Our WNBA reporters haven't given me any indication of that on the work I've done with them on your conspiracy theory. I do think this is what I find interesting about the whole thing. Like, how is it the same group of fans that sit there when the college football playoff committee comes in and they scream and yell about biases and say you should only be the people that have earned it, all of these stupid comments every time the committee votes, and it's like, well, the committee biased, they're just putting this team in because they want TV ratings. It shouldn't be done that way. And now you have a committee that comes in and says it's not our job to worry about ratings. We're putting together what we think is the best team. So they put together the best team, and all of a sudden everybody says, how can you not consider ratings? Like, we're talking about sports. And at the end of the day, like, for all of these committees, their charge should be, I'm putting together the best playoff roster, I'm putting the best team together, I'm putting the best format together, whatever it is. There shouldn't be a consideration of ratings. There should be a consideration of what's going to be best. So
I disagree with that.
So should they be putting Notre Dame in the college football playoff even if they don't deserve to be there just because more people will watch it than if it's a year where Memphis pops off? Like, that's bad for the sport.
You know how Bill Belichick used to always use the liner every time of I'm doing what's in the best interest of the team. And that was kind of like his way to get you to shut up is like, why would you start Johnson at right guard? Well, we thought that was in the best interest of the team. And that was kind of Belichick's thing. But there is some truth in that. I believe that if you are on the committee for the college football playoff, your job is to get the best teams in there. Whoever deserves to be there based upon what happens on the field. Your job in that committee is to get the best teams, not to get the most popular teams. I believe the job of the committee for Team USA to select this basketball team is to do what's in the best interest of women's basketball. And the best interest of the United States women's basketball is to have Caitlin Clark on that team.
I don't think that they should factor in popularity at all. Their job because
then why was
Larry
Bird? Why was Larry Bird on the Dream Team when Larry Bird didn't play a single game after that? Magic was HIV positive, and Christian Laettner had never played an NBA game. This was about sending the biggest stars overseas to blow the sport up, and that's exactly what happened. If you do not send Caitlin Clark to the Olympics, you are wasting a golden opportunity to grow your sport in your own country and maybe even grow it globally.
So many factors here. Number one, we don't even know if she would get playing time if she's over there. So then are they supposed to also give her playing time?
Because she dropped 30 on Friday night. She can play. We'll win every game by 50. It'll be fine.
But in the grand scheme of things, should the coaches be making their decisions then based on the popularity or based on the merit?
What's in the best interest of women's basketball?
What's in the best interest of women's basketball in general is not going to be like, I don't think you're going to see any wild thing accomplished from this year's Olympics that aren't accomplished from the next Olympics, the Olympics after that. The growth of sport's already astronomical. At some point you got to look at it and say, okay, are we going to reward the best of the best to put together the best roster? Like, that is the only thing that anybody should be thinking about in the Olympics, for the love of God. Like, I don't want suddenly the swimming team to come in and say, well, here's the thing, this swimmer can't really swim anymore, but man, we really got to put him in because they're more popular. Like, where do we draw the line on that?
Then take Magic Johnson off the Dream Team. We don't need Magic Johnson.
Yeah. Look, I have no problem. The dream team was assembled for the stroking of egos to make sure that a bunch of people could get that gold medal and go in and kick butt and just try and right the wrongs of what had happened to USA basketball. Fine. If you want to kiss egos that way, that's fine. But, like, what are we going to do in a name, image, likeness world? You know this. There are women's gymnastics all over the place. There are women's stars in the college level that are making millions of dollars because of their NIL deals, because of their popularity on social media. Should they be given a spot in some Olympic format of the gymnastics because they have a bigger following?
Yeah, but none of these
will
people are
help the
Caitlin
ratings?
Clark. None of these people are outdoing at Yahoo Sports the NBA Finals during the NBA Finals.
Understand, but where do we draw the line? Why do we
draw the
line?
line here.
I mean,
We
Libby
draw the
Dunn
line
is
at Caitlin Clark.
absolutely. But why? Like, that's such an arbitrary. So we draw the line because she's
First of
super
all,
popular.
I
like
think
the
Caitlin
Olympics.
is one of the 12 best players in the world. I mean,
Look,
she dropped 30 the other night.
100%. There's no doubt that I think Caitlin is a great player. I'm not taking anything away from that. Who am I taking off that list? Am I taking Taurasi off that list? Like, that's the one everybody keeps going to. Take Taurasi off that list.
Chelsea Gray.
The committee also the committee already came in and said, look, like, there are people that we need on this team that we think are calming presence in international play.
Oh, God.
Frankly,
We
the
haven't
other side
lost
of
a
it is-
game since like 1992 or 1990 or 1988 or
but-
whatever it
but, like,
is.
there's
We'll be
also
okay
an
without
element of,
Diana
like,
Taurasi.
Is it the worst thing in the world, by the way, that Caitlin's not a part of it? Like,
Yes.
considering the fact that she
It
was
is
drafted,
literally
she had, like,
the worst
16
thing in the world. It is.
It isn't. It isn't. She had like 6 days to get ready to be in the WNBA. The first few games didn't go well enough, and then all of a sudden everybody says, well, look at this, overrated, we're not going to pay attention. Then she gets it right. Now you want to suddenly have her figure out Olympic play, international, just the cluster that's going to be on her life, while also figuring out the international game, while she's out there taking on all these people. Like, I don't think it's bad for Caitlin to not be a part of any of this. Like, the growth of Caitlin Clark is not going to go anywhere. Caitlin Clark is a superstar. She's going to continue to kick butt. She's going to continue to get better and better. And if she ends up being the Michael Jordan of the women's basketball,
She
it brings
already
the whole
is
world
Michael
to it.
Jordan of women's basketball.
She's in popularity, yeah, absolutely. But, like, at the end of the day, she's on a bad team that's not winning a bunch of games. She's scoring some points now. It's all working itself out. But let's be real. Wemby needed a month to get ready to be an NBA superstar. She needs a minute. There's nothing wrong with that. And also, like, the committee is given this charge for the committee. Like, in my mind, if you tell committees that they need to worry about ratings instead of the actual play, then you've ruined the entire process of the Olympics. Like, that is absolutely taking the Olympics and throwing you-know-what all over it because you're worried about getting a few extra eyeballs. Like, look, at the end of the day, integrity to the sport matters far more than the advertising dollars if you're USA women's basketball and your committee.
No, it's not. And Fitz, I do appreciate you. We got to run on this. It's not about, well, you get a couple more eyeballs. No, you transform the sport. There's a big difference.
I totally disagree. I don't think somebody in Paris is suddenly going to start watching or stop watching Caitlin Clark because she was or wasn't on the
If I
US
told you
Olympic
this
team.
time last year that a women's basketball player would be more important to your business than the NBA Finals, you would have laughed at me.
I don't know, man. I think you're underselling what we all saw coming with Caitlin in the first place.
Come on.
Look, we do that even when we put together our cruise. We sent more people to the NCAA tournament for the women's side. Like, we sent social media people to Iowa games all year for a reason. Like, I interviewed Caitlin for the first time at ESPN her freshman year at Iowa. We did a whole episode on Caitlin Clark her freshman year on Hoop Streams. Like, this has been in the making for you. I don't think anybody's really surprised that she's the phenomenon she is inside baseball here. Like, for all of us in media, I don't think we're surprised that she is where she is and that it's doing this for the W. Like,
Fitz.
the W's been on the rise anyway.
Fitz, I love you.
Love you too, buddy.
Yep.
Have a great week.
Jason Fitz on the program. Stillman and Company, 102.5, 106 The Game. All right, so Fitz says, oh no, they made the right decision not to put Caitlin Clark on the Olympic team. One texter into the text line, Steven says, please make a more robust case for Caitlin Clark's selection to the U.S. women's team. She scored 30 points the other night. Isn't much of a case. I can't find a single advanced metric where she is a leader. Let me say this when it comes to Caitlin Clark. In the WNBA, there is one player that matters. Caitlin Clark. She's the one. And women's basketball is a growing sport. I mean, I remember when I started and my experience with a team was with the Louisville women's. And how many people are like, oh, who cares about women's basketball? Well, now you can't say that anymore. And it's growing and growing and growing and growing. And she has been the ignition for a lot. I mean, she has been the kerosene for this explosion of women's basketball. The Olympics are incredibly popular around the country. Why would you not take the opportunity to grow the game? And the other thing I thought about with Caitlin Clark is this. How many people are one-name guys? Brady, Peyton, Jordan, Kobe, Shaq. If I say Caitlin, like if we're sitting there saying, if I said to you, Ian, if I walked in and I said the Caitlin game is on tonight, you would know exactly who I'm talking about.
Yeah, probably.
If I walked in and said the Sabrina game's on tonight.
I like Sabrina.
But would you know exactly who I'm talking about?
Probably.
I don't think a lot of people would. I think Caitlin has reached one-name status, and I don't think Sabrina Ionescu has.
Probably not, but I like her.
Right now, the bottom of the screen says Messi. That's a one-name guy. Caitlin is already a one-named person. You can't say the same about Chelsea Gray, who is on the team. You can't say the same about Sylvia Fowles. If I said, oh, we're going to watch a Sylvia game. The what? If I said we're going to watch a Caitlin game, you know who I'm talking about. 615-737-1025. Coming up next. We get on Rand Carthon when he says things that we don't think are very true. And Brian Callahan has said some things this spring at the podium that I'm not convinced are totally true. And so, because this is a show that is fair, we will go over them. Do not do Stillman and Company, 102.5, 106.3 The Game, streaming live on Twitter, Twitch, YouTube, and Facebook live from the Busy Bee Plumbing, Heating, and Air Conditioning Game Nashville Studios. No Jared versus Joe this week. Joe is on vacation. Jared versus Joe, though, is usually presented by Pella Windows and Doors of Nashville. Caroline, by the way, will be joining us for the entire 5 o'clock hour tomorrow, as she only has 2 more days left with the radio station on a full-time basis. I'm bummed about that, by the way. You don't seem that bummed about it, but I'm bummed about it.
Oh, I mean, it's definitely going to be a little bit different around here, but got to be excited for her.
Well, I'm excited for her, but that doesn't mean that I'm not bummed out. But anywho, Caroline will be with us for the entire 5 o'clock hour tomorrow. And again, Jared versus Joe usually is in the spot presented by Pella Windows and Doors in Nashville. So, I have always told you guys, and whether or not you believe this is on you. You can decide what you want to do or not do. That's your business, not mine. I have always believed in being fair. I have always believed in being fair. I do not believe in making things up. I do not believe in spouting off opinions that I don't believe. I have never, some people think Jared Stillman can't possibly think the things he says. No, I do. Really, I do. I might be crazy. I don't know. But I'm not disingenuous. So I get perturbed when Rand Carthon gets up in front of a microphone and says things that seem to be not true, right? Like the ball not bouncing their way, like injuries being the reason the offensive line was bad last year, like the fact that they knew that the Falcons were going to take Michael Penix, like the fact that the Mike Vrabel firing was really hard on him, those kind of things. And every time he tells a fib like that, I'm like, well, how can I trust you on anything else? When you fib about something like, oh, we knew the Falcons were going to take Michael Penix. I don't even know the reason to lie about that. Well, Brian Callahan has had a handful now of press conferences since he's been the Titans coach, now that the offseason program has concluded. Every week that there's an OTA, Brian Callahan talks. He did not talk the second day of minicamp, but other than that, every time the Titans hit the field, Brian Callahan got to the podium. And I'm just thinking about some of the things Brian Callahan said over the offseason, and I don't know if I believe him. The first is on Treylon Burks. Remember, the Titans had signed Tyler Boyd, and all of a sudden, everybody, because we operate by the duck theory, it looked like they were not interested in Treylon Burks. It quacked with the addition of Calvin Ridley and Tyler Boyd, like the Titans were not interested in Treylon Burks. And it seemed like it was a duck. It looked like they did not value Treylon Burks. And he right there at the podium says, au contraire, mon frère.
As far as Treylon's role, he's going to play everything. We've told him that from the beginning. He's going to play inside. He's going to play outside. And he's going to carve out a role for himself. And I had him come up today and do the break after practice because his work that he's put in has been really impressive. Just to give you guys some context, Tuesdays are our harder days of our 4-day work week. It's a really heavy day. And so the load on the players is high. And what I mean by that is both acceleration, max speeds, and yardage. And so Treylon, I think, ran 3,591 yards on Tuesday and then hit our top speed and team-leading top speed at 22.6 miles an hour in practice. So super impressive workload and performance. And so he's had a really good offseason. I'm excited about what he can bring for us. I meant when I said that the other day that I think he's going to have a role to play.
Oh, man, he's going to matter on this team. We believe in him. I mean, he ran the fastest with this guy. He matters. He's as a gunner? Because we get to minicamp, there he is out there at gunner. And, I mean, I hate to break it to you, but the best gunner the Titans have had I can remember over the last decade was a guy by the name of Chris Milton. And how important was Chris Milton to this team? And you know what I mean by that. So it's like, oh, no, I know everybody thinks that Treylon Burks isn't going to be an important part of this club, but he's got a role to be the gunner. Not sure that's really a role, at least a role worth getting up at the podium and talking about. Then there was last week, he was talking about the backup quarterback job, which again, the Titans moved on from Ryan Tannehill. I get it. Makes sense. Obviously, Will Levis was the starting quarterback going forward. There was no question about that. The owner even said it when she fired Mike Vrabel. Then they signed Mason Rudolph, who started a couple of games for the Steelers last year and won them. And so everybody said, okay, well, Rudolph's the backup, and we all know Malik is the third stringer, right? Brian Callahan last week.
What do you see from Mason and Malik behind Will, and how do you go about trying to decide how much work to give each of those guys, not only now but moving forward?
Yeah, I mean, it's a competition. They're going to both get a fair shake at the two job, and we were both up front with both those guys telling them that's how it's going to work. So they'll split reps pretty evenly. They'll get a chance to play quite a bit in the preseason. That's usually where it separates is the game action when you're really getting the evaluation. But happy with where both of those guys are at. Just like any competition, there's going to be ups and downs. There'll be days when you guys come out and one looks better than the other, and the evaluation is a totality of all their time in the offseason and training camp and in the preseason games. And so it's an ongoing evaluation, and there's going to be ebbs and flows, and guys will look good one day and not as good the other. And so you're trying to get their totality of work as to who's best equipped to be the number two.
Do you really believe that Malik Willis has a shot to be the number two quarterback of this team? I mean, really? Like Malik, the same Malik that we've seen the last 2 years. The same Malik that jumped back in bounds in the 2-minute drill last year. Like the Malik that the fans booed off the field. And again, because I was booing, I feel like I was booing the coach for putting Malik in the game. I was not booing Malik, but that is really splitting hairs. I mean, it's kind of the same thing. So I'm really supposed to believe that Mason Rudolph, who started a playoff game last year, is battling with Malik Willis, who stinks, for a job. And then yesterday, he was asked about Tavondre Sweat, who the Titans drafted out of Texas with all of these red flags, who the Titans flew down to Texas in order to get to know who the Titans put their names on the line for and who has not participated in any open practices this offseason outside of rookie minicamp, which does not count. This is what he said about Tavondre Sweat and whether or not he was concerned.
Sweat, obviously not available again today, but how is he conditioning wise, and is that any kind of concern as you take your break and get ready to come back for camp?
I'm not concerned, no. It's just one of those things that sort of lingered on him a bit. Again, don't anticipate it being a long-term issue for us, but didn't have any sense to rush him out here, not feeling perfect. And so he'll get his work over the summer. He's got a plan in place, and I'm confident that he'll execute it. So biggest thing for him is working still and getting in shape, ready to roll. He's obviously working, not in front of everybody, but he's here working. He's not getting the full field work, but he's here and he's getting his work in. So anticipate him being ready to roll, and we'll see what he's got in training camp.
Do you really believe that? Guy hadn't practiced in 5 weeks, and Brian Callahan's like, I'm not concerned. So again, when it comes to Treylon Burks, they say, oh no, I'm excited. He's got a role on this team. Does he? Backup quarterback. Oh, yeah, it's a battle between Mason Rudolph and Malik Willis. Really? Malik? So Malik Willis has a chance to be the backup quarterback. Seriously? Tavondre Sweat hasn't practiced in 5 weeks. Oh, I'm not concerned about that. Like, it's hard for me to believe that. But as I go through these fibs, and again, we compare it. When we think Rand fibs, we bring that up. When we thought Vrabel fibbed, we brought that up. So this is all about being fair. But the one thing I will say is, at least with these lies, like at least I think I can understand a reason for lying. I do not see any reason for Rand Carthon to lie that, oh, we had a big inkling that the Falcons were going to take Michael Penix. I mean, not one person in America thought the Falcons were going to take Michael Penix. And if anybody had known that the Falcons were going to take Michael Penix, they would have been booed off the whatever room they were in because everyone would have said, you're so stupid. So I just, I don't understand the reason to lie about that on Bussin' with the Boys. I understand the idea about lying about Treylon Burks' role. I understand the idea about lying about Tavondre Sweat. Because, again, if he gets out there and says, oh, I'm concerned Tavondre Sweat hasn't been out there on the field after they stuck their neck out for him, it's like, do you guys have a freaking clue what you're doing? So that's opening a can of worms. But I still think he can be a little bit more honest. especially when it comes to the backup quarterback position. I think he can be a little more honest. That's all I'm saying. 615-737-1025 is our phone number, 615-737-1025. We'll get to some of your phones on this. Plus, I'm starting, that might be the right word. I am starting to have a conspiracy theory on Treylon Burks. We'll get to that coming up next. Stillman and Company, 1025, 106 through the game.
What a coach says about a player in public and what he says to a player behind closed doors are often different, and the coach often has different reasons for that. And so I am in no way being critical of the coach. I wasn't talking about his physical effort on full speed reps. I talked to you, Jared, repeatedly about you don't always go full speed physically, but you must always be at full focus mentally. They drafted, the Titans did, a rookie, Jaquan Jackson, right?
From Tulane, yep.
He did, yeah. And I watched him in that same practice be incredibly deliberate in watching with his eyes the ball hit his hands, and then watch with his eyes as he tucked it away to secure it. I wasn't talking about his physical effort. I was talking about his mental focus as was manifest by his physical actions going through these drills. And so that's what I was upset about. I absolutely stand by it. I'm happy to talk to the assistant coach, head coach, player, former player. I'm happy to talk about that because I have seen way too many players that practice in such a way that they guarantee they will not be able to get the most out of their ability.
That was Trevor yesterday on the program. The take heard round the world. And I thought Mike, I think it was Mike in Spring Hill earlier today. I don't know. Somebody in the text line, I think it was Mike in Spring Hill, had an all-timer when he said only Titan fans can say nobody nationally cares about us. Then the one guy nationally who lives here shows up to practice, says something they don't like, and then it's like, well, no, that's not true. So again, let's operate under the assumption that Trevor is an expert, which, considering the fact that he was a first-round draft choice and he's started in the NFL at all 5 offensive line positions and he played 12 years in the league and he was a broadcaster calling games in the NFL and has been with ESPN for 20 years as one of their top college football analysts, I think he qualifies. So let's just assume that Trevor knows what he's talking about. It's a very strong assumption that I make. Yet, he's wrong because Nick Holtz said A+ effort. And Brian Callahan talked about all the yards that Treylon Burks has run. And Tyke Tolbert, the wide receivers coach, came out yesterday and addressed Trevor's criticism directly. Said he heard it. So we've got a little bit of a conspiracy theory here. And that is the Titans' actions have told us they don't believe in Treylon Burks. You don't spend $50 million for a receiver and then go bring in another receiver, all while hoping that you're going to get one of the 2 receivers at the top of the draft board. You don't do that if you think you've got a guy in Treylon Burks. I mean, last year, it was like pulling teeth to get them to go after a receiver, and they got lucky that DeAndre Hopkins fell in their lap and they were able to cheap their way to him, and that not one other team thought, you know what, we could use DeAndre Hopkins, and paid him a boatload of money. But they believed in Burks last year. This year, they don't. And so we talk about the fibbing, because I think that when Brian Callahan talks about this great role that he expects Treylon Burks to have, I don't believe in that. I mean, I think about all the guys they're going to want to throw the ball to before they're going to want to throw the ball to Treylon Burks. Again, I have a hard time really thinking that he's telling the truth. But it does them no good to say he's got bad effort. If they think that he doesn't really love football, or they think that he doesn't have the it factor inside of him, or any of these things. It doesn't do them any good. But it does do them good if people think that Treylon Burks is actually salvageable. Like, if there's a belief around the league that, hey, Burks, he was a former first-round pick, and, Burks, he could make a difference. And because he had 16 catches last year, that's terrible. But at some point in time, as training camp continues, there is going to be a team that looks at their roster and says, holy crap, we don't have any receivers. Like the Chargers. Some team is going to look at themselves. Somebody might get hurt. Somebody might look at their team and say, oh my God, we don't have any receivers. We got to do something. And when that happens, you can call the Titans because they have Treylon Burks. But if Treylon Burks has bad effort, bad attitude, nobody's going to want to trade for him. And I think that the Titans are probably looking at Burks and saying, if we could get a 4th for him. And then I'm reminded of what happened 2 years ago. The Titans went into the season thinking that either Dylan Radins or Nicholas Petit-Frere, a.k.a.,
PT.
Thank you. They went into the season thinking that either Radens or PT could play right tackle. It was a humongous miscalculation by John Robinson, and honestly, of the mistakes that were made, probably one of the ones that I was the most disappointed by, especially considering that they could have just tendered David Quessenberry a contract, and while David Quessenberry wasn't good, David Quessenberry was at least serviceable. They get into the preseason, and they realize, oh my God, we don't have a backup tackle. Because PT, I believe, was originally supposed to be the long-term option to replace Lawan. So they get into the season with PT starting at right tackle. They don't trust Radens. They're like, we don't have a backup tackle because Kendall Lamb's not here anymore. Ty Sambrilo retired. Radens sucks. Like, what are we going to – and we let Quessenberry go. What are we going to do? And he traded a 5th-round pick for Dennis Daly. Now, if all they were saying in Carolina was Dennis Daly has a bad attitude, Dennis Daly doesn't work hard, Dennis Daly, do you think that they would have traded a 5th-round pick for Dennis Daly? And by the way, I'm not saying Dennis Daly has a bad attitude or anything like that because I don't know. I'm just saying that the Titans were desperate, and so they traded a 5th-round pick to get Dennis Daly. Well, there's going to be a team that is as desperate at receiver this training camp as we approach the start of the season that was as desperate as you were for a tackle 2 years ago in which you made a trade. And a 5th-round pick's a bag of balls, but there's going to be a team that's as desperate that might trade you a 4th to get Treylon Burks and to take the $8 million that's guaranteed to him over the next 2 years off your hands. So when I talk about does it do you any good to lie, in this case it probably does. Because it doesn't hurt his value. If you say, oh yes, A+ effort. Because I know Trevor saw what he saw. I'm not questioning that. Been kind of questioning some of the motives that have justified some of the things that have happened. Phone lines driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com, 615-737-1025. A lot of you want to weigh in on this. A lot of you want to weigh in on the Callahan stuff, you know, the telling the fibs. We'll do that next. Stillman and Company, 615-737-1025 here on our program. Let's talk a little Twice Daily. You know I love Twice Daily. Twice Daily is the best. You know, I haven't been to Twice Daily this week yet, I don't think. No. I think I was there Monday. I can't remember. I go to Twice Daily all the time. I absolutely love Twice Daily. Twice Daily has all of your cravings, and you can save on every visit. Stop in and get rewarded. All you need to do is join the Twice Daily Rewards program to unlock special discount savings, enter their sweepstakes, and so much more. Try their new wraps, the Italian, the ham and cheddar, the turkey and Swiss, and the Nashville hot chicken, and they are made to order with your favorite toppings. So when you download the Twice Daily app, you can order ahead. It's simple. Or at Twice Daily, it's snack time all the time with favorites like chicken fingers, tater rounds, new pretzels, and more. And my favorite are the boneless wings. I think the spicy boneless wings they have there are fabulous. So get to Twice Daily. Download the app. What are you craving?
he has exceeded expectations so far, and I know, being a first-round pick, he's kind of like a hot-button issue a little bit with the media here. It seems like there's a lot of trailing questions. He has been unbelievable. His work ethic every day has been awesome. He's, vertical speed, his size, his strength has showed up nonstop every day. And so he's made some plays down the field. We'd like to see him. He had one yesterday down the sideline. We'd like to see him reel in. And so that'd be one of those things of, hey, when the big plays are there, you got to make them. But he's done excellent for us, and he's really been versatile, being able to play inside and outside. So he's actually been rotating it at all three spots. And, a lot of times he's been running with the ones because guys aren't there. And, it's the off season, so it's voluntary. So he's been doing a really nice job kind of plug and play in that standpoint.
How would you categorize the effort that you've seen?
I would say it's been excellent. He's been awesome. And attitude and effort for him would be A+ from us.
A+, says offensive coordinator Nick Holtz. Ian, do you have a thought, or do you want to go to the phones?
To the phones.
Phones on Brian Callahan, Traylon Burks, the offseason. You know how it is. Gunner says, I think it's ridiculous to think that Brian Callahan would come straight out and start calling people out. As bad as it's been on Burks, it would do absolutely zero good for Callahan to come out and say more negative about him. So I think there's probably something to that. And again, if they are, there's one of two things that's happening here with Burks. And I also think that we should not lose sight of the fact that Trevor believes after watching Burks play gunner in practice, that he believes that Burks, because he's so big and so fast, could actually win them games as a gunner. Now, the only guy I can think of that's ever won games as a special teams player like that wasn't a returner or a kicker, is Steve Tasker. And I'm not going to just assume that Traylon Burks is going to be Steve Tasker. But I do understand kind of the concept. But one of two things is happening. Either they are trying to pump up his value because they do want to trade him a la DGB for Dennis Kelly, which would be so nice if the Titans could pull off a similar trade involving Burks. If I told you right now, Ian, that you could get the next Dennis Kelly for Traylon Burks, how fast would you pull that trigger?
I'd make the trade.
I mean, because then you got your right tackle.
You at least have some type of swing tackle insurance.
That was such a good trade, by the way.
DGB, nothing. Gone.
No, just
See
a
ya.
bum. Just a total bum. And they got Dennis Kelly, who was a good tackle for them for 4 or 5 years. Man, what is Nick Wright doing sitting like courtside at an NBA Finals game? Regardless. The second thing that they could be doing, pumping up his value for a trade, the second thing they could be doing is hoping that, hey, man, like at some point these receivers are going to get hurt and he's going to have to go in there and play. And when he goes in there and plays, we're going to need him to play well, a la Chris Sanders, Derek Mason in 2000. So he's right. It would do Brian Callahan no good to get up there and say, oh, yeah, we don't give a rat's ass about Traylon Burks. One texter says, I agree with your point about the fibbing, but I think you are lumping in coach speak with some of the fibs. When you say you can see the reasons behind what Callahan is saying, to me, that's coach speak and separate than some of the blatant lies. It seems like Callahan coach speaks and Rand just lies. But the backup quarterback battle, that's not coach speak. That's a lie. There's no battle for the backup quarterback spot. And if I was Mason Rudolph, he said that we told them both on the front end that they'd be competing with each other. But if I was Mason Rudolph and I'm like, hold on, wait a minute. You're contemplating giving Malik the job over me? That's not what I signed up for. I do not think so. One texter says the only thing that makes sense is that they were shopping him, couldn't find a buyer, and now he's a cut candidate or a gunner. He'll be a backup. And I would not cut Traylon Burks. If I could trade Traylon Burks I'm setting the line at a 5th round pick. If I can get better than a 5th round pick, so if I can get a 4th round pick, or I can get a 4th next year, i.e. a 26th 4th, or I can get a player, or if I can get something better than a 5th round pick, I'll do it for Traylon Burks. But I will not cut him because he's better than, say, Jaquan Jackson or Kyle Phillips or one of these other Scarbinis that'll make the roster over Burks. And I'm already guaranteeing him $8 million. So what would what would be the point of that? So I under no circumstances, in my opinion, is Treylon Burks a cut candidate. I really want to guarantee something with Treylon Burks, but I just don't feel confident enough about anything to bust out the horn and put in a guarantee. Dustin says, I have been skeptical of Rand very much, and I don't like Chad Brinker, but I've had this disconnect where I've believed that they're going to be good for no reason other than I really want it to work out. It's starting to hit home that it's delusional to think that this is going to be the case, relying as heavily as they appear to be on Sweat and he writes NPF, but on this show we say PT. On Sweat and Nicholas Petit-Frere this year is rough. Snead and Spears are going to have dramatic fall-offs if and when their knees go out on them. And your team of exceptions line is spot on. So the team of exceptions line is that Tom Landry told Bill Parcells, if you draft for exception, pretty soon you'll have a team of exceptions. I.e., you can talk yourself into that guy, but if you talk yourself into that guy, pretty soon you're going to have a team of bad players. I am not as pessimistic as that tweet, or text, I should say. I'm not expecting a dramatic fall off with Spears. And I'm optimistic that it can work out with Snead. My beef with the Snead thing is the amount of people that just looked at this when they did it and said, oh, we acquired L'Jarius Snead for a third-round pick next year. Way to go. We got the lockdown corner. We're the man. It's like, you do realize why that happened, right? No. It happened because we're the best. It's like, no, it happened because he's got bad knees. He doesn't have bad knees, Jared. He played every game in Kansas City. Right. And he played every game with bad knees. And every team, including the team that he was on, was convinced not to give him a long-term contract because those knees are supposed to get worse. I found it so disingenuous when L'Jarius Snead was like, my knee's fine, go watch the film. Yeah. And if I could have you on last year's team, I would really, really like that. Goodness gracious. Cameron says, if the Titans get offered a fourth for Burks, I'll pay for his flight. I'll never forget, there was a year where Rob Gronkowski, I think, was traded to Detroit. And Gronk told Bill Belichick, if you make that trade, I will quit. So you can trade me to Detroit. And this was when Detroit was bad, when Matt Patricia was the coach. So Gronk was like, you can trade me, but I'm going to quit. So you're going to trade, for a second-round pick or a first-round pick, and then you're not going to end up with the first or second-round pick because I'm going to quit, and then they're not going to make the trade. And so Gronk ended up staying in New England. And I said to Floyd at the time during a break, I was like, well, could you offer Delanie Walker? This was when Delanie was still good. I'm like, could you offer Delanie Walker to New England for Rob Gronkowski? And Floyd was like, if New England would take that offer, John Robinson would get in the car right now, put Delanie in bubble wrap, and drive him up there just to make sure that he got there safely so that he could get Rob Gronkowski in return. And that's what it sounds like this texter wants to do with Burks if the Titans get offered a fourth. I think you're more likely finding a player kind of the Dennis Kelly route than you are getting a fourth-round pick. One texter says, how do you justify Derek Mason wiping tears of blood defending Treylon Burks? So I don't exactly know what the tears of blood means. I don't know if that's like a reference to something. I do know Derek has been in support of Treylon Burks. Here's why I think Derek has supported Treylon Burks. Because Derek Mason was drafted in 97, and he played a little bit. He was a fourth-round pick, and he played a little bit in 97. Derek was not relied upon in 98, and he was not relied upon as a receiver in 1999. So they went to the Super Bowl in 99. D. Mace, I don't know if he was hurt or not, but D. Mace was inactive for the first 2 weeks. Roel Preston returned punts for the first 2 games as Titans. D. Mace was a great returner in 99. He returned a touchdown against Cleveland. He returned a free kick in the AFC title game after a safety that basically put the Titans in front for good, that essentially ended any chance Jacksonville had of winning that AFC title game. But he wasn't relied upon as a receiver. I want to say Derek had something like 19 targets in 99. And Derek set an NFL record for all-purpose yards in 2000. So again, 97, 98, 99, his first 3 years, Derek had not busted out. 2000, his fourth year, he gets the opportunity, and he's in the Pro Bowl. And so I think Derek is probably looking at his experience where he had a coaching staff that didn't believe in him and still made a 15-year career out of it, and is probably thinking, hey, they doubted me too. And so that's why I think Derek Mason is so supportive of Treylon Burks. And I get it. I mean, there were times when I would listen to the midday show, when Caroline was first kind of leading it. And there were things I'd listen to and I'd be like, I don't know if I would do it that way. And then I had to tell myself, I'm like, wait a minute. I've been doing this for 10 years. She's been doing it for 3 weeks. There's a difference. And I remember when I was just starting out doing it myself, and if I did a solo show early on in my career, it was like I was just trying to swim to shore. I was just trying to get to a commercial break. That's all I was doing. There are 11, 12-minute segments, and I'd be at about minute 7, and I'd be like, how am I going to get out of these next 4 minutes? Now, I'm 3 minutes past the break now. Ian probably doesn't think that's very funny, but now that's fine. And I think that I can see things, and I see the way that Caroline has developed, and I'm like, I can see kind of myself and how I went a different path, but I can see the path. I think that's what Derek sees with Treylon Burks. That's just me. Trent says, it's that mediocre mentality. I don't know why the Titans are afraid to say the truth, and Rand Carthon is just full of it. Your conspiracy theory on Treylon Burks is the exact conspiracy theory I thought. At this point, the Titans will be lucky to get a 6th-round pick. I wonder now maybe he should bulk up and learn to play tight end. Don't even get me started on tight end. Don't even get me on that one. For whatever that's worth. 615-737-1025 is our phone number, 615-737-1025. I was freaking bummed out today. I was bummed out. And I think a lot of people were bummed out about this. And we'll get to that next. Stillman and Company, 102.5, 106.3 The Game. Let's give away something since I was bummed out, and I don't want you to be bummed out. Be caller 5 right now at 615-737-1025. You'll win a pair of tickets to see Martin Lawrence at Bridgestone Arena on Sunday, January 19th. See Bad Boys Ride or Die in theaters now, starring Martin Lawrence and Will Smith. Stillman and Company here on the program. So this morning, I woke up and I was talking trash. I got a buddy of mine that when somebody passes away, we text each other, somebody famous, like, oh no, not this guy. And I got a text from my buddy. His name's Logan. He texted me and he said, oh no, not Jerry. And I thought, Jerry? And at first I thought Jerry Jones. I was like, oh my God. And then I saw on Twitter that Jerry West, the logo, had passed away. Let me say this. Jerry West was before my time. Now, he played in what, the 60s, the 70s, something like that? I mean, that was before my time. But that doesn't mean that I don't know about how great Jerry West was and about how Jerry West helped make the NBA what it is today. I mean, for crying out loud, he is the logo. And yet, the Jerry West I know was the Jerry West that built the Shaq and Kobe Lakers. It's the Jerry West. Those guys helped finagle John Calipari into drafting Kerry Kittles like an idiot so they could draft Kobe Bryant in the first round of the draft. The same guys that wooed Shaquille O'Neal and hired Phil Jackson and built that championship dynasty organization. The same Jerry West that went to Memphis and turned them in from a clown show into a contender. The same Jerry West, who I think in the commissioner's statement today was a part of 6 championship teams outside of the teams he played on. And again, I talk about what was before my time. The Showtime dynasty was before my time, and he helped build that. And I also read Jerry West's book. I was a senior in college, and Kindle had just become a thing. And Jerry West's book, West on West, came out. And I read it because they were like, this is a very dark book about Jerry West and his life and everything else. And it resonated with me so much reading that book. Now, I have spent years trying to get my head in the right space. I mean, I've done all different kinds of therapies, everything else, and I feel like I have a little bit of a control now on addressing my feelings and, enjoying certain things differently and whatnot. Maybe some of that's just growing up, I don't know. But as I was reading Jerry West's book, he would talk about how they'd win the championship, and it was like, okay. They'd lose the championship, and he was miserable. Like, couldn't get out of bed for weeks. And I thought to myself, I'm like, I know people like that. At times, I feel like I'm like that. Where something good happens, and it's like, all right, hooray. Something bad happens, it's like the worst thing that ever happened. And to think that somebody as successful as Jerry West could be driven like that, it allowed me to feel almost like, you know what? This might be how I'm built naturally. And I'm not saying I'm Jerry West. But I would come across another book years later about Nick Saban in which it talked about how, Nick Saban's never happy. And I was like, okay, I could resonate with that a little bit. And so, to me, I look at Jerry West and what he accomplished and the way that he kept building teams and how respected he was. And I'm like, man, that was an all-time great. And I never met Jerry West. I never interviewed Jerry West. I read his book. But it's almost like that sentiment of, oh, not Jerry West, especially right after Bill Walton. I mean, like, how many great icons can we lose in a row? And so I'm sure tonight the NBA Finals broadcast will certainly have a different tone to it with the passing of Jerry West. But as far as what matters to me, like what's important to address on the show? Is it important to address, the NBA Finals game and being excited? Or is it about Jerry West and the greatness that was Jerry West and the fact that Jerry West is no longer with us? And I picked Jerry West. And maybe I'm just a hater because I have almost no interest in this NBA Finals game. I'm sure I'll watch tonight. But there's no juice. I hope the Celtics win tonight just because I'm ready to be done with this. And I'm ready for Brown and Tatum to win a championship. And I also think that the Celtics are an example of why the coaching doesn't matter in the NBA. Danny Hurley turned down all that money from the Lakers. And I'm like, well, good for him because the coach doesn't matter in the NBA. But it's a sad day as far as the NBA is concerned because, once again, there are very few legends that are in the same caliber of legend as Jerry West. Jordan, Bird, Magic. I don't even know if Kobe's in that category. LeBron is. Kareem. The NBA lost a great one. The world lost a great one in Jerry West. We do have the NBA Finals tonight at 6:30. Stillman and Company. We'll see you all tomorrow at 2.